Welcome to Raw History. Here, we cut through romanticization and speculation to show you, well, the unfiltered reality of human history. Picture a Roman merchant vessel in the 2nd century AD, its hull loaded with Egyptian grain, cutting through Mediterranean waves toward Rome. Below the waterline, invisible to the crew, millions of larvae drift through the water. These are Teredo Navalis, the naval shipworm, though that name is a bit misleading because these creatures are not worms at all. They're actually bivalve mollusks, clams with elongated bodies and tiny shells reduced to drilling heads. Each larva searches for wood. When it finds the hull, it begins boring immediately, eating tunnels through the planks and consuming the very structure that's keeping the ship afloat. This was the terror of ancient mariners. This was the enemy that could sink a fleet without firing a shot. And the Romans, well, they developed a remarkable solution that protected roughly 2/3 of their ships for over 5 centuries. Shipworms have plagued humanity since we first ventured onto water. Fossil evidence dates them to the Cretaceous period, 145 to 66 million years ago. The earliest proof of their impact on human civilization comes from ancient Egypt, where archaeological excavations of hull planks show unmistakable Teredo damage. Egyptian shipbuilders responded with practical adaptations. They built ocean-going vessels with thicker planks than rivercraft, added sacrificial wood at joints and seams, where shipworms typically entered selected dense, fine-grained woods like cedar and Nile acacia that resisted boring and coated hulls with pine tar. By 350 BC, the Greek philosopher Theophrastus was writing about shipworms compromising vessels throughout the Mediterranean. These creatures lived in warm salt water, spreading rapidly through maritime trade routes. A single piece of driftwood could carry larvae thousands of miles. Ships themselves became transportation for their own destroyers. The shipworm life cycle made them devastatingly effective. After spending weeks as floating larvae feeding on plankton, they settled on wooden hulls and immediately began boring. The 2 shell plates at their heads functioned as rasps, grinding through wood grain. They extracted all nutrients from the wood itself, growing from microscopic larvae to creatures 8 inches long, tunneling deeper as they expanded. From the outside, a hull might appear sound, but inside, the planks resembled honeycombs, structurally compromised and ready to fail. Roman shipbuilders, inheriting shipbuilding knowledge from captured Phoenician vessels, needed a better solution than tar and thick planks. Archaeological evidence from ships dated between the 3rd century BC and the 2nd century AD reveals their answer: lead sheathing. This was not a minor modification, but a comprehensive protective system that required substantial investment and technical expertise. The process began in metalworking shops, where craftsmen hammered lead into thin sheets. Metallurgical analysis of recovered samples shows the sheets averaged 1.25 millimeters thick, ranging from 0.9 to 2.5 millimeters. The Romans produced these sheets in standardized sizes, typically 1 meter square, though the largest measured 1.7 to 2 meters and the smallest around 0.35 to 0.5 meters. These dimensions allowed shipbuilders to efficiently cover hull surfaces with minimal waste. Installation required precision. Working from scaffolding or with the vessel hauled onto shore, shipwrights fastened each lead sheet to the hull planking using copper nails. The use of copper was deliberate. Copper and lead create a galvanic couple when submerged in salt water, meaning the metals interact electrochemically without corroding each other catastrophically. Iron nails would have rusted quickly, compromising the entire system. The lead sheets overlapped slightly, creating a continuous metallic barrier between the wood and the water. The effectiveness of lead sheathing operated on multiple levels. First, it created a physical barrier. Shipworm larvae simply could not penetrate metal, When they encountered lead instead of wood, they just moved on, searching for more suitable locations. Second, lead is inherently toxic. Even if larvae managed to settle on lead sheets, the poisonous properties of the metal killed them before they could establish themselves. This toxic quality also prevented other marine organisms from attaching to the hull, which reduced fouling by barnacles and algae that could slow a ship and damage wood over time. Third, lead improved waterproofing. Roman ships used shell-first construction, with planking connected by mortise and tenon joints that made hulls naturally watertight. Lead sheathing added an extra layer of protection, preventing water infiltration through any gaps that might develop as wood aged and warped. Some researchers suggest the added weight of lead sheets low on the hull also improved ship stability, lowering the center of gravity slightly. Underwater archaeological surveys along the Israeli coast have documented extensive lead artifacts from Roman shipwrecks. These intact assemblages, preserved by unique site formation processes that protected them from salvage, include not just hull sheathing, but also anchors, fishing gear, cooking equipment, and containers. The sheer quantity of lead aboard these vessels indicates how central the metal was to Roman maritime technology. Studies have shown that people aboard ships were exposed to more lead than the general Roman population, making these vessels, really, mobile sources of lead pollution affecting both crews and the marine environment. So, around two-thirds of Roman vessels actually used lead sheathing during the height of this practice. But, this wasn't universal coverage. Lead was expensive and, honestly, it added quite a bit of weight. Smaller coastal vessels, fishing boats, and rivercraft often stuck with more traditional methods, like tar and pitch. On the other hand, military warships and large merchant vessels carrying valuable cargo across the Mediterranean received lead protection. The investment really made economic sense. A merchant ship that lasted 20 years instead of just 5, thanks to lead sheathing, would repay its initial higher construction cost many times over. Eventually, this technology faded away. By the 3rd century AD, as the Roman Empire faced growing economic pressures and the Mediterranean became less unified, the use of lead sheathing declined. The knowledge lingered in fragmentary form, but the systematic application pretty much disappeared. Centuries later, maritime powers would end up rediscovering metallic hull protection. The British Royal Navy, for example, began coppering ship bottoms in the 18th century, finding that copper sheets provided similar protection against shipworms. Then, in 1878, shipbuilders discovered that creosote could effectively deter Teredo Navalis when thoroughly impregnated into wood, though, to be honest, the treatment worked best on soft resinous woods like pine. The Roman solution to shipworms really stands as proof of sophisticated problem-solving under practical constraints. They identified a biological threat, understood its life cycle well enough to know that physical barriers worked, selected materials based on both protective properties and construction feasibility, and, quite impressively, implemented the solution across their maritime infrastructure for centuries. The lead sheets hammered out in ancient metalworking shops and nailed to wooden hulls represented engineering that acknowledged nature's destructive power, yet absolutely refused to accept defeat. So, go ahead and hit that subscribe button to join Raw History as we keep revealing the practical ingenuity behind ancient civilizations. And, share this with anyone interested in maritime history, ancient technology, or the constant human struggle against nature's relentless forces.